the early 17th century, the Kingdom of Hungary was a land of jagged peaks and deep, dark forests, a place where fog clung to the valleys and war scars never quite healed. But the darkest place of all wasn't hidden among the trees, it stood above them. Csejte Castle. Locals whispered that if you passed its stone walls at night, you could hear the muffled cries of young girls. Not screams, but something quieter, something already exhausted. They said the Countess who lived there wasn't just cruel, they said she was trying to steal time itself. They said she washed away her wrinkles with the warmth of youth. Tonight, we step into the life of Elizabeth Báthory. Was she history's most prolific female serial killer, or the victim of one of the most calculated political conspiracies in European history? Grab your coffee, turn down the lights. This is Mindful Progress a Journey with me, Torrid Embrox, as your host. Elizabeth Báthory was not born a monster. She was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families in Europe, the Báthorys. Wealthy, influential, brilliant, and, of course, volatile. Violence was the language of her world. Hungary was the front line of the war against the Ottoman Empire. Soldiers marched constantly. Executions were public. Punishment was instructional. Elizabeth saw these things as a child. No one shielded her eyes, 'cause why would they? This was how order was maintained. Unlike most women of her time, Elizabeth was highly educated. She spoke Hungarian, Latin, German, and Greek. She read philosophy. She understood law. She knew how power worked. And she learned very early that power answered to no one. At 15, Elizabeth married Count Frederick Nadasdy, also known as the Black Knight of Hungary, a war hero, a feared man, a brutal one at that. Frederick spent most of his life away at war, leaving Elizabeth alone to manage vast estates, dozens of villages, hundreds of servants, endless responsibility. According to later testimonies, Frederick taught Elizabeth methods of punishment, how to discipline, how to instill fear, how to break someone without killing them. When Frederick died in 1604, everything changed. Elizabeth was left a wealthy, powerful widow in a world run by men who owed her family enormous sum. And when I mean enormous, I mean enormous, very big amount of money, including the King of Hungary himself. This is where the story begins to bleed. Csejte Castle did not sleep. Servant girls arrived, often sent by poor families who believed Service to nobility meant safety, education, and opportunity. Some were beaten for mistakes, some were punished for imagined slights, some simply disappeared. At first, deaths were blamed on illness, then we started blaming accidents. After a while, it turned into silence. Nobody really knew what was happening anymore. But as everybody says, the stone remembers, and the castle began to develop a rhythm. Punishment, followed by quietness, and then its an easy replacement. The legend tells us that one day, Elizabeth struck a servant girl so hard that blood splashed onto her hand. She supposedly looked into a mirror and saw that where the blood touched her skin, it appeared to her as that her skin in that area turned younger somehow. Whether this moment happened or not almost doesn't matter because the idea spread. Rumors reached King Matthias II between 1602 and 1610. He sent Count Georgi Thurzo to investigate. What they claimed to find was a house of horrors. Witnesses spoke of torture, starvation, needles driven beneath fingernails, needles driven beneath fingernails. One claimed Elizabeth kept a diary listing 650 victims. The infamous bloodbath legend that she bathed in the blood of virgins didn't appear in writing until more than a century later. But the trial records, they were horrifying enough on their own. On December 29, 1610, Thurzo raided the castle. Legend says Elizabeth was caught in the act. Her accomplices were arrested, tortured, and executed. Elizabeth was spared, not because she was innocent, but because she was noble. Instead of the executioner's axe, she was sealed inside her own castle, a tiny slit for food, darkness, and 4 years of isolation. A woman who once ruled hundreds reduced to waiting. Now, let's take a breath, because when we examine the facts through a modern lens, the stains on the walls begin to look a lot like ink than blood, actually. The conspiracy theory is impossible to ignore. King Matthias II owed Elizabeth's family a massive debt. Declaring her a criminal erased it instantly. Of the 300 witnesses, many were repeating rumors or were tortured into testimony. And in the 1600s, if you rack someone long enough, they'll tell you anything. You beat up an innocent guy and he's gonna say whatever it takes to save his own skin, obviously. It does not necessarily have to be true. And then there's the power play. A wealthy, independent woman controlling land on a war border? She was a threat. So, was Elizabeth Báthory a vampiresque serial killer? Or a cruel noblewoman exaggerated into a monster to justify a land grab? The truth likely lives in the grey. She probably abused servants as many nobles did. But whether she murdered hundreds or became a convenient villain, history may never fully decide. If you travel to modern-day Slovakia to the village of Castis, you can still see it. The ruins of Csejte Castle stand atop a dolomite ridge, not majestic but skeletal, like bleached bones clawing at the sky. You're not just walking through a tourist site, you're walking through a 400-year-old crime scene. Elizabeth wasn't initially bricked into a cell, she was under house arrest. But as her world shrank, so did her freedom. 4 walls, 1 slot in the door. Elizabeth Báthory died on August 21, 1614. She was buried in the local church, but if you go there today, she is gone. Villagers were outraged at having a monster buried among them. Some say her body was moved to the family crypt in Ext, whereas others whisper she was dumped in an unmarked pit. To this day, no one really knows where the Blood Countess lies. Elizabeth Báthory remains a shadow in history, not because she was unique, but because she wasn't. Her story forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Evil does not need madness. It needs permission. It needs systems that protect power, people who obey, and others who look away. The most dangerous phrase in history is not hatred. It's, "This is just how things are." Today, Csejte Castle is a peaceful hiking destination, beautiful views, open sky. But as the sun dips low and shadows stretch across white stone, it's hard not to wonder, is the wind just the wind? Or is it the echo of a woman who once believed the walls would never close in, finally realizing that they had? This has been Mindful Progress, a journey. I'm Torrid Embrox, and that was it. I'm signing off.